Thank you very much, Tom. Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to our first ever career panel and alumni and employer networking event. We're thrilled to see everyone here, alumni, employers, our esteemed panelists, faculty, staff, and administrators. So first of all, while we get started with our panel, each of the panelists will tell you his or her own story. Then I'll go through the interesting questions that we received from you on your responses to the invitation. I'll do my very best to make sure that we get to hear different perspectives from everyone on the panel this evening, so that hopefully you'll get a lot of really good insight from them. And I'm excited to hear about their backgrounds as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. First, I would love to hear from Ariane Pope-Punter. She's currently project director at the New York City Mission Society. So tell us about yourself.
Hey, everybody. Ariane Punter. Thank you, Shannon, for being patient with this process. I don't know if Dawn is here. She's still on maternity leave. Dawn, I'd like to thank Dawn for considering me to be a part of this prestigious and inaugural event. I was born in Queens, Jamaica, New York. I was raised by my grandmother in a church, which was my first social networking training ground. And so I grew up in the New York City public school system and went to Martin Luther King High School. And from there, I attended Manhattanville College in Purchase, New York. But I really wanted to go to Howard University. And my attendance at Howard University, which I finally got in, was my second training ground for networking. And I say that because later on when we talk about some of the strengths you need to have, that was part of my development. So after Howard, very interested in entertainment and got an internship at Uptown Records in the early 90s, where I interned and was a part of some major albums, Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, Heavy D. I was a part of a lot of that production, and I did a lot of street marketing, and I learned a lot of those skills that I transferred into my present-day nonprofit. I don't know what else. I hate going first because I don't know what else to do. You want me to follow this right here? A little bit of this, because I don't want to drag on.
I think you've done well so far.
So just, if you want me to talk about the transition, because I'm not sure, you want me to how I transition? So working in that type of environment for 10 years, the networking, the kind of soft networking skills, just really being pleasant and getting to know people. Going to a school that really helped me network myself through with classmates. At the time I went to school, a lot of us were very interested in hip-hop. We started the first hip-hop conference in the country in '89. And we just took what our strength was and what we liked, because hip-hop was changing at the time. So we got invited all these artists to come to Howard. They were coming there anyway. And then a lot of us who were a part of that hip-hop conference went into law, went into advertising, and really became entertainment lawyers and marketing. So that was kind of like the transition into that entertainment field. I needed to go back to school because education was key when I grew up. So I decided I needed to get my education. I had a daughter. I watched people who didn't raise their daughters in this industry, and I wanted to continue. So I went to college in New Rochelle, where I received my graduate degree in communications. While I was doing that, I decided to take a different turn. I saw the industry. It wasn't really for me, even though I had lots of fun. But I really wanted to do something different. So I networked with friends and worked at part-time at a jazz club, because I love jazz. And I did that while I was in graduate school. And then right after I finished graduate school, a friend of mine said, there's a recruitment manager position at Help USA. And I went to interview for it. And they liked me because of my energy. I took all those skills, and they were excited about the fact that I had worked in entertainment, but I also was very clear that I was very passionate about grassroots youth development. Because while I was in the industry, I saw young people getting record deals, and I had people from my neighborhood who were dying because of gun violence. So all those things were a part of my passion. And it really did mesh with each other. So I got hired to be a recruitment manager, and I recruited volunteers to help young people with mentoring. Because part of my growth was that people mentored me, and so I just fused all of it. And then I became a recruitment manager at Mentoring USA. Budget cuts, make a long story short, through my networking, my daughter, who was in an after-school center at New York City Mission Society, was there. And they asked me, it was an opportunity, and because of my background, I was hired as a recruitment manager, as a program manager, and I helped young people whose parents were incarcerated. And I found volunteers to help them match with these young people whose parents were in long-term incarceration. So that's really how I found my way in. I never thought I was going to be a nonprofit, ever. Someone told me a long time ago, don't do nonprofit. But I was different in nonprofit. My energy was different. And you find people that work in nonprofit, they've worked in a long time, they have a certain way. And I came in like, let's make it happen, Let's make it happen. And they didn't understand let's make it happen. But it was like, no, I don't, if you had a different personality and this person had a different personality, that was great. Just get the work done. And we got the work done, and I was able to make a difference there. So I hate to be long-winded about myself. Maybe I'll jump in when the others go. And that's where I'm at now, Program Director for Restorative Justice Services at New York City Mission Society. And really because of budget cuts, a lot of stuff got cut out, and I found this great restorative justice program. We wrote for the RFP at the job, and it's helping young men who are incarcerated. It's helping them. The Arches program is mentoring. We have a GED program. And I just took all those leadership skills that I had and coupled it with what I understood in the neighborhoods, that our young men and our young women who are suffering due to gun violence, and I just meshed it all in, and somehow it worked. And I can answer. I'm better when people ask me questions later. I don't want to, because I don't want to be rude to my other panelists. But if you have questions about it, I'm certainly willing to talk a little bit more about how I put myself, who I am, into nonprofit. Because it's not easy. Certain time, we work they want it a certain way, but I think I bring myself into the picture. So.
Thank you, Ariane.
Okay.
And you'll certainly have an opportunity following the panel presentation when we go into the other room for networking to talk further with her about some of those things. Thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Now we'll get to hear from the co-founders of Highbrid Media, Daniel Gutzmore and Juan Perez.
How's everybody doing? Good. Well, me and my partner sit next to me. Juan, our backgrounds are very similar and very different. And I'll give you the abridged version because the unabridged version will be here till next week. And Thanksgiving is close by, so. But essentially, what Ariane was talking about as far as starting at a certain position and not realizing how these skills that you're acquiring when you're doing what you might consider not important work, how those are going to help you down the line is definitely at the center of our story. Highbrid Media, we're now Highbrid Media, but Highbrid Media actually started as Highbrid Entertainment and has morphed into a few different businesses over the course of now probably 14, 15 years. So if you backtrack to 1998, 1999 in Morgantown, West Virginia, you have a freshman such as myself and an upperclassman as Juan, really looking to, and these are the parallels to Aarian, really looking to make a way into the music business. So we were producers, event organizers, which is if you know anything about college, is a fancy way of saying I throw parties.
Exactly.
So we went to party for free, and everything that came along with that, and found a real knack at it. And it was a group of us. We wanted to do music, and that morphed into more of a business model as we started to get into the early 2000s. So putting together events, putting out music, paying for it, clearing samples, paying producers, organizing studio time, so forth and so on. Fast forward to post 9/11, 2002, 2003. The one unique thing about our group in Morgantown is that we were all from New York. And if you know, as New York people in this room, you know it doesn't matter anywhere you go in the world, all the New York people kind of gravitate towards each other.
Yeah.
Especially Brooklyn people. It's like, Brooklyn, where you at? We here. So, you know, we kind of gravitated towards each other. And fast forward to 2002, 2003, we're all back in New York now, postgraduate, still trying to keep this hybrid entertainment thing going. But really struggling for a way to find revenue. At this point, you know, from putting together the events, putting together the album, what we didn't realize is, I knew it about myself, but what we didn't realize is collective, like we were turning into entrepreneurs. We were learning how to run a business. So, you know, probably about 2003, 2004. No, it was approximately 2004 because I remember it was around the same time George Bush got reelected. And we knew that we were in trouble. So we had to do something to kind of position ourselves, you know, in another light. So 2004, you know, really struggling to generate revenue from a music perspective, we came up with an idea for advertising. And I won't go into the backstory behind that, but this morphed into Highbrid Outdoor. And Highbrid Outdoor was about branding outdoor advertising spaces that targeted the ethnic communities. And we did okay with that from 2004 till about 2007. And in this time, we're working. You know, I'm working. I work for a huge bottling firm and manufacturing firm that you probably would recognize if I said the name. I also worked in litigation support. Juan worked in radio. So again, going back to Ariane's point, really cultivating our skills along the way. So it's like the old metaphor of the Rolling Stone. You're picking up moss, you're picking up traction, you're picking up these things that you might consider soft skills, but they're really propelling you to where you need to go. So here we are in 2004. We have this, you know, emerging out-of-home advertising company. But, you know, again, over the years, we consistently transition from the feedback that we were getting from our clients. You know, we were lucky enough to go out there, and the first piece of business we pitched, we secured, and that really started our company. And up to this day, 10 years later, of now being Hybrid Media, we've never been financed by any outside institution. All of the money we generated, and you know, we generated significant revenue, has been from our own equity, so to speak. So the company, just based on the feedback that we're getting, you know, the company really transitioned to where we are here in 2013 as Hybrid Media, which is a company that organizes brand communications for clients looking to reach the ethnic market in New York, New Jersey, and South Florida. Way past, obviously, and I'm not saying way past like that somehow below, but more from an entertainment company into an outdoor advertising company to now more of a strategy company, which is extremely more lucrative. So again, just piggybacking off what Aarian said, just going throughout your professional career from, you know, an undergrad, grad level, you're picking up these skills that, again, you may not be recognizing right now, but you need to hone these skills and recognize that these are skills that are valuable and tangible, that either if you're going to start your own business, that'll help you, or if an employee is looking for human capital that you can put at the forefront and say, hey, these are the skills that I have, and this is why you should hire me.
Thank you both. Just to add to the networking piece, I also attended West Virginia University myself, and that is how I was able to secure these two individuals for our panel through networking with my own alumni group. So it just goes to show you that it does work. And when you talk to people and you participate in activities that have to do with your college and with some of those groups of people, that you never know what it can lead to. Okay, so moving on, we'll go ahead and hear from someone else who works in sort of a related area. Susan Karlin, who is the president of Suka Creative, will give us her story.
I'm a Queens girl, too.
Oh, yeah, Jamaica Queens, South Side.
So I grew up in Queens, and I actually went to Hillcrest High School, so I was in Jamaica.
Okay. Wow.
And then to Queens College. And then I took a year off of school, out of school, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, you're expected to know at 18 what you're going to do with the rest of your life, and we're still trying to figure it out now, which is why we're here. And I figured that year I just wasn't ready. So took off the year, took a bus, Greyhound bus, cross-country one way to San Francisco, and not knowing where I was going to end up, but it was a fantastic learning experience. And after about a year of playing around, and I said, you know what, I have to go back home. I have to go back to school. So, so great that you know that already, because that's why you're sitting in these chairs. You know the importance of getting a college education. So then graduated and was a communication arts major. I really didn't know what I wanted to do still. You'd think at 22 I would. My dad was a designer and an illustrator. And if you've ever watched Mad Men, you know that show? So he started his firm in the 60s, in 1963. And he said to me, come into my business. No, Dad, thanks. I'm really not interested. So I then decided, you know, there was a shortage of special ed teachers at the time, and I thought, you know, I think that's something that I'd like to do. So I got a master's. I went back to Queens College and got a master's in special ed, taught in Queens, in junior high school 210 for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. Thank you. 7th and 8th grade, and then just said, you know, I love being with the kids. This was really just great for me to be here at this time. But I think I'm ready to go into my dad's business. So it was 1985. I called my dad up one day because I was tired of being on the beach and working on my tan. You know, teachers have the summers off, some teachers. And he was so welcoming, and I was lucky to have that kind of start and really learn from my dad, who was my best friend and my mentor. And he also, during that stage, because you've watched Mad Men, he taught me about martini lunches. Oh, yeah. I don't do them anymore, but it was the 80s. And then we stayed together for 7 years. Sadly, he passed away. And at that time, a lot of people in the company were his peers, and they wanted to retire. So we closed his company. And in 1992, I started my own company. So we're different than what my dad had, but we're down in Soho, and we're a boutique firm of like 10 people. We do marketing, communications, strategy, design, graphic design, and we do a lot of work in the not-for-profit space. So I think it's always good to be more diversified and not just specialize in one particular industry for us. So we do finance, nonprofit. We do a lot of work in higher ed and healthcare. So yeah, we have a lot of fun what we do. I have a great team, and I could tell you that I'm just really satisfied. And do I bring what I've learned about teaching kids or my education background into what I do today? I'm not a designer, so I'm running a company, but I'm not a designer, which is rare, but I know how to hire talent, and I've got a fantastic, talented team. But as my panelists said earlier, you know, nothing you do is wasted. We were talking earlier about transferring your skills. So you may work in retail now, but you could easily transfer that into other skills. You know, today you have to be very client-centric, customer-centric. You really have to know who the audience is. And whatever you learn along the way is really important and contributes to who you are today. The other thing that Juan pointed out is networking is really important. I met 2 people here tonight that were on an online class together, and they just met each other tonight. So I really urge you guys to reach out to each other, walk up to someone and just introduce yourself. And you never know, you know, it's all about networking and who you might know to help someone else out.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks.
It's so nice to hear the sort of trend across the panel about networking, and I think that should be no surprise to any of us. Okay, finally, we'll get to hear from Alan McFarlane, who works at New York University. Take it away.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for inviting me, and I also want to thank Kelsey. Where's Kelsey? Kelsey's my buddy from NYU. I'm going to embarrass her, but I was actually in a pinch for a program that I was actually giving a presentation at a conference, a major conference, and I think Kelsey was either new on the job or hasn't been there maybe a little less than a year, and she came to my rescue because we did this fantastic presentation, and she was very involved. And one of the tips I want to tell you is make sure you volunteer. Take advantage of the opportunity to be a part of something, because she volunteered to take on this challenge, and actually she did a fantastic job, so I want to thank her again for this. And so I'm happy to be here. And Maya Angelou said something one of her favorite sayings is that people may forget what you do and they may forget what you say, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And it's something about student affairs that sort of echoes that for me. Over the summer, I happened to be called over the July 4th weekend because there was an Arab Spring in Egypt. And the Vice President of Student Affairs asked me to go to Kennedy Airport to greet the students that were being evacuated from Egypt because of what's happening in that country. And so I was asked over the holiday weekend to go to Kennedy Airport to debrief the students and to debrief the university on what occurred. And I was on the phone when they were picked up by armed guard for the students from the different locations in Egypt and Alexandria, and in Cairo. And so I share that with you because it's interesting how they say that sometimes higher ed is not exciting. That was really an exciting day, and so an important day in terms of its importance. I'm also from Queens. I went to John Brown High School, but I'm also originally from Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay, I got cousins in Maryland. I got cousins in Baltimore. I know about
And the
Baltimore.
Brooklyn thing. So the first African-American male to graduate from NYU was a man by the name of Thomas Clayton French. And in his yearbook, it said to Thomas, a man who traveled all the great cities of the world, Brooklyn.
Wow.
That's an NYU alum, so I'm surrounded by Brooklyn. So
Okay.
my first educational experiences was at LaGuardia Community College. I spent a semester there, and it was the first year. Do not do the math on this. It was the first year that City University charged tuition.
Oh, wow.
76.
My father will not forgive them for that.
That's
At
a market
all.
for you.
See what the school for free.
And so I ended up, I couldn't find a job in McDonald's, actually. I remember going to McDonald's with a couple of students, and the hiring manager there pointed to 10 of us and said, you, and you stay, and the rest of you, thanks for coming. So I couldn't get a job. The tuition started that year. LaGuardia was a great place. It was a fantastic experience, but I couldn't stay there. So I ended up joining the United States military. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. So I did the U.S. military for 4 years, and I got out of the military. And my first job at New York University was a receptionist. I am the assistant vice president for outreach and engagement now at NYU. Wow. So I think that everyone has a path to take, and do not underestimate yours. It is a work in progress. The goal is your outcome. When I took on that job at NYU, which was, I think I was talking to Tom, Tom knows, when I took on the job at NYU, yes, I took advantage of the educational benefits at the time. And so I was very fortunate to be able to do that. But at the same time, I had to perform. And so for every job that I've ever had, I put 3 letters behind it. So when I was a receptionist, the 3 letters behind every job I've ever had was CEO. And that is I guess that's what you want to bring to every job that you have. You want to treat the position as if it's bigger. You're bigger than the job, and the institution is not bigger than you. And I don't mean it in an arrogant way. I just mean in terms of how you want to have your own level of excellence. And certainly it's important to network and to ask people for help. And a great question I ask students when they're making their transition to NYU, I say, so have you ever been a college student before? And they all say no, and that's part of the transition. You don't know, so you have to continue to ask for help and get assistance. So the job has been very rewarding for me, and you get thank you notes from students. So those of you who want to be in this field, you get thank you cards and stuff. They say thank you. It's amazing. I mean, I never knew that that job could be this rewarding. And I've been very fortunate because even then I've actually had a chance to teach. I'm an adjunct professor, and I teach a course called Black Diversity Contributions to America. James Weldon Johnson taught at NYU, as a matter of fact, in 1938. The reason why I'm telling you this is because my experiences also give me an opportunity to look into a lot of different areas in terms of just growing in terms of my field. So I've had several jobs, I've had several promotions, and I think there is this running theme. What is this theme? What are your guiding principles? How do you want to function? How do you want to operate? There are people talk about having professional goals, but no one talks about having behavioral goals. And they're two different things. They're two different things. So I want you to think about that as you think about embarking or continuing on your careers. Because I think, how do you want to leave a room? How do you want to leave a situation? I think that's something that's helped guide me in my own career. And you never know, because there are peaks and valleys as you are experiencing people that support you. There's a saying, there are allies and there are alligators. And the truth of the matter is that there are challenges that you're going to be confronted with, so we cannot pretend that those moments are not coming. And the last thing I'll share is probably the interesting thing is that when we talk about the future of higher education, I think alumni are critically important. I think that even as I'm an alum of NYU, I try to make sure I give back, because there are students that are coming behind us who are walking the same path. So I think there's something in terms of supporting your school and supporting your institution. That's something I take very seriously. And I know that you as well just wanted to share that as something to be thinking about as well. And I'll end there.
All right.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Okay, now that we've gotten to know our panelists a little bit this evening, I'll go through some of the questions that came in from your responses in the invitation. I thought a lot of these sound really good, so I'll be happy to hear what the panelists have to say. So I'll go ahead and get started with, let's go back to Alan, and because he touched a little bit on if you're starting your career, or if you're transitioning, or if you're thinking of doing something different. Alan, if someone was looking to transition into the field of higher education, what would be a good way that they could market themselves for that? And what other things might somebody do to try and get into that field besides internships?
President Obama did a very interesting thing when he became president the first time around. And there was an article in New Yorker that talked about how he ascended into the ranks of the Illinois State House. And one of the aldermen who served as city council members said that President Obama had a very interesting thing he used to do all the time. And she said that he would always ask someone to be introduced to someone else. He was always asking someone, introduce me to that person, introduce me to that person. So I think some of that is about getting the credibility a little faster. Certainly there is an importance of actually you introducing yourself, but it's always good to know if you know someone. Like some of you who know Kelsey, you tell Kelsey, introduce me to him. And so you get that credibility, so think about that. The other thing is that there are many professional associations. You certainly want to get yourself up to speed in what's happening in the industry that you're in. There's no reason why you cannot look at what's happening in the field right now. So definitely go to the professional websites. There's something, for example, there's the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, but this is advice for every field. So go to the professional associations, find out what they're talking about, find out what the issues are, find out what the opportunities are, find out what they're researching, and certainly think about joining them so you could add that to your resume and find out how you can become a member. And then there's the tried and true method of doing some informational interviewing. Certainly informational interviewing is great because you get to ask questions about why you chose this field, what advice would you give me if I were entering this field, and what you never ever do is say this, well, if you see something that's interesting, or you see something that might be someone from my qualifications, please consider me. Never say that. Never say, you know why? Do you know why? I'll tell you why. Because they're already worried that you're going to ask them that anyway. and it may not have a job for you right then. You may not have the qualifications and skills. So make sure you're clear on what you're going there for. You want to get information about how to be an expert or learn about the field. Don't worry about that other part, because what happens if they like you and you make good presentation and someone says, hey, I met someone that might be good. You already made an impression because you're talking about the skill set, not the fact that you're looking for a job. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, that was great.
That was
Very
great.
nice.
Great pointers.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm certain that I've said those types of things to our students or alumni as I'm advising them about informational interviews, so I'm glad that you backed me up on that.
Good. You're welcome. You're welcome.
So let's move on to a similar question. Let me turn this one over to Juan Perez. Juan, what would you say defines a strong leader in your industry?
I think leaders are. I think it works here, right? Leaders. I definitely think leadership qualities are usually across the board very similar. It doesn't depend on a specific industry, but in our industry, which is advertising, marketing, but also entrepreneurs, you see people who are self-motivated, people who are organized. Time management skills are very, very important. And I think there's just an air of professionalism. People always say, oh, you're the marketing expert. I'm not an expert at anything. I'm a professional. And I think that's the most important distinction, is for people to see me as someone who, I do this for a living. This is something that I take tremendous pride in. And this is something that I dedicate my life's work to. I'm passionate about. Passion is another thing that you'll see in leadership, in highly effective leaders, is that they're not people who will just sit back and rattle on about their job as if it's something that's mundane, a mundane task. But leaders are people that you will look at and almost immediately be able to see the passion about what it is that they do. If I wasn't selling, advertising or working with companies on their media plans and marketing plans, I would be passionate about business as well. And you would be able to see that passion that exudes from me from the jump, from us just being able to meet one another. And I think that from a leadership perspective, that's very, very important. There's always been this question whether or not leaders are born or leaders are made. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there are people who naturally have these qualities, but that's not to say that people have not developed them over a period of time. And I think leadership is, you can work on your leadership skills by being around other leaders. We always talk about our circle, our network. I don't want to overuse that word, but the people that we're around, whether it's our mentors or just our peers that we think have qualities that we like about them, that we want to in some way have in ourselves. Well, there is leadership by osmosis. Just being around other people, you're able to pick up on some of those qualities that you may not even realized about those individuals before. So I think being able to surround yourself with other leaders is definitely something that's important. And also looking at, extend that as far as you can. Sometimes leaders within your own peer group is important, but it's also important to say, what are those aspirational leaders? There's no reason to believe that you couldn't write, to use an example, President Obama a letter, and maybe he writes you back, maybe he doesn't, but maybe he puts you in contact with someone who in your industry might be of help to you. So don't sell yourself short. I think where you are, wherever it is only a stepping stone to your next level. And the more you aspire for greatness as far as leadership is concerned, the faster you'll be able to ascend.
Thank you, Juan. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, And I'd love to hear sort of about that from some of our other panelists. So let me start with the two ladies from Queens on the end. Susan, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? And then I'll ask Ariane to answer the same question.
You know, I do really love what I do, so it's hard to say what I would want to do if I wasn't doing this. I started out in theater careers, so I did have an interest in acting, but I knew that wasn't going to go anywhere. Can't pay the rent all the time with that. So I guess I would still be in the arts. I would go back to school today and get an MBA. So I guess over the last few years I've seen that I have a huge interest in business, running a business, leadership in business, and not sure what I wouldn't go necessarily on Wall Street, but I would definitely want to do that.
Great, thanks.
So I'm similar. And so the 10 years that I talked about being in the industry, I was also an artist. I was a poet, professional performance poet. And I traveled I was with NACA, the National Association for College Activities. And I probably, had I not stopped, I was in a improv group. I did improv, and I studied at the National Black Theater, and was in that. I did some work. I was a writer. Anthony Hamilton's first album never came out, but it's actually online, called New Soul. I did an original poem for that. Some people here might be my age. You heard about the Lost Boys. All right, I did a original poem on that in the 90s, like when Jill Scott was doing poetry and Raz Baraka on the Roots album. Those are all my friends. My poetry friends. You met Jessica Care Moore, all these poets. And so I was in the poetry scene and doing all of that stuff. But when I had my daughter, I made a decision. It was a choice. She's 15 now. Sometimes I tell her, I should have just lived my life, because you should not appreciate what I do for you. And y'all know that if y'all got teenagers in the room. So, I decided to go back to school. But what I probably would have done is continue being an artist. And, and I still do. I still take classes, acting classes, and I bring all that into it. And I just wanted to make a quick point, if I could, talk about mentoring. My dad was also my mentor. My father was extremely politically astute and active. He was an activist. And also he coupled being an activist with also his love of music and jazz and culture and art. So being a part of that environment growing up, I thought he knew Dizzy Gillespie personally, because he would just have these conversations with my uncles about jazz and Miles Davis. I thought he knew them personally, and I didn't know them personally, but now I get it now. But having that in me, and also understanding that, you could love music and art, but it can't be art for art's sake. It has to be music and culture and politics. So that's how I was able to fuse. That's how I'm able to survive in nonprofit, because I know these young people listen to music, and hip hop is jazz. So I can understand where they're lost at, and I think I can bring that too. Those skills that we talked about, I can bring those skills into my role, although very stiff and tight. And Cheryl Jenkins is here, and she knows. She's like, what? All this stuff. She had no idea I had a life before. She's a fiscal person, and I'm just like, I'm like at work. I'm just like, very detail oriented. But really, if I could live the life, which I am going to, theater does pay. It pays but you're right. I'd have to give it all up. My husband would divorce me if I gave it all up and just like, let me just live my life. But that's what I would do. But I do it part-time, but I still do it. I still do it sometime, though. I still indulge, so I'm not giving it up.
Can I add something? So, you might have heard the saying, do what you love and the money will follow.
That's right.
Right? No.
That's why I went and got a job.
Now, here's the twist on it. Do what you love and follow the money.
I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
Thank you.
Understood.
Very great way to end that one. So both of them have now mentioned that their fathers were mentors and people who impacted their lives and their careers. So I'd like to hear from Daniel now. Daniel, who are your mentors, or who's someone you can credit with sort of helping you along in your career and your professional success?
to your original question, some of my mentors or people that I follow are, well, a mentor of ours that we actually know is Byron Lewis, who founded the Uni World Group, which is like the first and largest African American advertising agency. People like Earl Graves, founder of Black Enterprise Magazine, who I've had the opportunity of meeting a bunch of times. It's not like I could call Earl Graves on the telephone, but he's a mentor of mine. People like Don Coleman, who's head of Global Hue, who essentially did the whole Census 2010 campaign. People like Bob Wingo, head of Wingo Advertising. So these are other gentlemen such as myself, African American minority people who are in my field that I follow and have reached out to. Have all of them gotten back to me? No, but I follow them and look at them as mentors. Then obviously you have more personal mentors. There are a lot of people that when we first started, especially Highbrid Outdoor, we have people always ask us how many employees do you have, and similar to Susan, we do run a small shop, but a lot of our work is outsourced. We work with probably multiple number of vendors, and those vendors have employees. So a lot of the people that we work with now were already in business when we started. So there's like a gentleman named Mr. Ricketts, who we work very closely with and work closely with from day one. And he runs one of the largest private mass transportation companies in the city. He's a mentor of mine, a gentleman named Mr. Ayala. And the list goes on and on. So the mentors and people I follow, come from multiple places.
I think you make a good point, and a lot of those people, even if it's not someone that you necessarily have a direct relationship and connection to, they inspire you.
Right.
And I think that's something important when you start thinking about careers and making decisions and trying to figure out what the next step's going to be. Think about what inspires you, and sometimes that can sort of lead you down the path that's going to work. So speaking of following people in your industry and sort of getting informed about the leaders and things like that, let me turn things over to Alan. Alan, what would you say are some hot trends or exciting things, or maybe some challenges that are going on in your industry of higher education that sort of the insiders are talking about?
I would say right now we're talking about globalism in higher education. What I do now, one of the things I do right now is I actually meet with international students to talk to them about their transition to NYU in New York City. Last year, there were over 1 million students from around the world that came to America, that come to America for American education. Universities are actually competing in some ways to court and enroll international students to our community. The challenge for universities is how do we build community, reaching out to not only our international students, but how do we work with our American and domestic students? How do we help them take advantage of their sense of community in terms of being on our college campuses? So the goal for us is, what does it mean to be a global citizen? What does it mean to be a global citizen? How do we reconcile the issue of reaching out on a global level, but also dealing with the problems on the local level? If you think about the local challenges that any university has, and then they talk about the global aspect of it, then how do we manage that? How do we reconcile that? How do we help our students understand it? How do we think about it as an institution? Individuals who can help us figure that out, individuals who have a sense of wanting to have a commitment in terms of how our students can develop. If you are in the field of higher education, and my colleagues know this, that there's a tremendous amount of growth between the ages of 18 and 22. Clearly having understanding of student development theory that you will learn in school. How does it all play in terms of how we help our students get the most out of the institution, out of the university? So it's exciting when you think about the outcome. The outcome is that if I can have a student who is here from America and another student who's here from Iran, and we can have them work in the classroom together, what does that mean in terms of how they are able to work with one another in terms of addressing not only their own individual concerns, but the concerns of the community? And so the question is this, is it local commitments or our global connections? Do we have to make a choice between the two? How do we bring the two together? Gordon Brown spoke at NYU, and he actually helped launch, and I'll end this. Gordon Brown, this is where we're talking about at NYU. So Gordon Brown spoke at NYU about, he's actually help us launch a master's degree program that's looking at higher education on a global level in terms of global leaders. And so he talked about the global dimension. The global dimension is that how are countries thinking about their role in the global community, even though they're part of the United Nations, in terms of they're bringing their own agenda, they're bringing their own local commitments, but what are your global commitments, and how do you actually incorporate that? So these things are trickling down to how we are treating or educating our students. So the goal is how do we get our students thinking about local commitments and global connections, and how we get our institutions thinking about local commitments and global connections, and how the two work together. So it's very exciting in terms of that being an area of growth in higher education and an opportunity.
Interesting. I think that probably obviously applies to the workplace as well.
Yes.
With globalization and as far as in school and having those connections locally and globally, and then translating that after school and in the workplace.
Exactly.
We're getting here toward the end of our panel, but I thought we would end on something a little lighthearted and fun. We already talked a little bit about if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? But I would like to know, just briefly from each of our panelists, what did you want to be when you were a little kid? When somebody would ask you when you're 5 years old, 7 or 8 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? What did you used to tell them? We'll start with you, Daniel, and then go ahead.
I don't
down the
remember.
line.
Well, funny enough, I really quickly decided that I wanted to be in advertising. Well, first and foremost, my mother told me that I was going to be a lawyer. And that went on for a little bit of time. And then in around junior high, I was like, I thought about architecture. But one thing about me, and I won't drag it on, if you guys know anything about New York City kids and the way we grew up, I was what's known as a latchkey kid. So I came home by myself, opened the door, cooked my own dinner, whatever, and just sat there and watched TV. And after doing my homework, of course. And I used to tell my dad, I used to tell my mom, like, the commercials on television suck. I can make better commercials than this. And right then and there, I decided I was going to be in advertising. And I don't necessarily make commercials, but I'm in advertising.
Simple answer, I am still a kid.
That's good, that's good.
I can't really tell you what I wanted to be when I was little, but I can tell you what I didn't want to be. Pretty much all my entire family is involved in medicine. My sister is a surgeon, and my mom's a doctor. My dad was in health, and grandparents, all that. And for whatever reason, I didn't want to do any of that. And I knew that I didn't want to kind of follow in that same footstep. But I think that I remember, I love baseball. And yeah, so being a baseball player was always my dream. And I think they're still accepting some tryouts for the Mets. They're about that bad. But
You did an informational interview. There you go.
Alan, what about you? What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I was the kid with the briefcase.
Oh my God.
That was me.
Mercy.
I wanted to work in an office,
Wow.
and I wanted to make $200 a week.
That's about right.
True story.
Oh gosh. I did not want to work in corporate America. I remember that saying when I was younger. I didn't know anything about corporate, but I knew I didn't want to work in corporate America. Just because it seemed to me, my father went to work every day, and he had his suit on and his briefcase, but he wasn't that happy. And I said, I don't want to do that. And so nonprofit gives me a little bit of flexibility. And so that's what I said when I was younger. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really didn't. I mean, I made my cousins dance and all that stuff, and I was producing them doing stuff like that. I was going to make them dance, but do shows when we were little. And I guess that's what I didn't want to do. So I didn't really know. I wanted to be an attorney at one point, but other than that.
And Susan?
We were just saying, I don't remember anyone asking me, what did I want to do? Or I guess it would be the arts, because I just grew up around the arts and really appreciated art history and went to museums living in New York. So art, definitely not math. So, so take a finance class. So I guess I would say the arts, painting, arts, or performing still is in my heart. So I'll have to find out where that acting class is. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing that little sort of personal tidbit about your backgrounds. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our panel presentation, although I feel like we could sit here and listen to their stories and their advice for the rest of the evening. But I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to move into the networking portion of the evening. I'd like to thank all of you for being here with us this evening. I learned a lot and enjoyed your remarks, and I'm sure that our alumni and others in attendance did as well. And now I'll just turn the floor over to my colleague, Jill Reinhardt, our new Director of Institutional Advancement, to sort of give you all a charge for the next part of the evening.
Thank you, Shannon. Just a quick round of applause for the panelists. Thank you guys so